Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's great to have so many people joining us today for the webinar on the Continuing Competence Program. My name is Kathy Arsenault. I'm the practice consultant for the Association of New Brunswick Licensed Practical Nurses. I am recording this webinar, but don't worry, you won't be shown on the webinar. I've hidden all the cameras now while we start the presentation. And we'll make sure it gets uploaded to our website if you want to share it with some of your colleagues or some of your staff. I know there's some nurse managers on the line today as well. So we'll make sure that gets uploaded to our website and also on our Facebook page. And the French version of this is going to be done next week with Joanne Graham. So that's going to be available on February 14th at the same time, 1 o'clock. So I wanted to do just kind of a really quick and to the point presentation on the Continuing Competence Program, because I know there's still a lot of questions about this program. It's new. Some people are really nervous about it. So this webinar, I hope, is going to tell you exactly what you need to do to comply with the Continuing Competence Program, how you're going to do it, and we'll give you some examples as well. We're going to open it up at the end of the presentation through some Q&A so we can have some good discussion about it as well. And this is our first auditing year for CCP, so I know there's been a lot of unease from people as well. So hopefully after we get through this webinar, you're going to feel a little bit more comfortable with the process and realize some people are just making it bigger than it is, I guess I say. And as we go through the steps, you'll realize that it's not that hard of a process. So there's 4 steps that you can do to follow this. I just see we have a chat here, and I just want to make sure people can see okay. Can't seem to hear anything. Can everybody else hear me? If somebody can just put that in the chat. Can anybody put in a chat that you can hear me okay? Betty can hear me. Yes, okay, everybody can hear. You might just have muted me by accident, the person that chatted that. There is a mute option as well, or maybe just turn your volume up some. So we'll get started because it seems like most can hear. So what is continuing competence? So basically your continuing competence program is just a formal system to ensure that all LPNs are staying current and competent in their practice and ensuring that you're up to date with your skills while maintaining your professional competency. So we know that over time best practice changes and it improves. So we need to make sure that we're participating in that lifelong learning to make sure that we're continuing to use these best practices and staying current. So a really good example of this would be how we care for residents in long-term care. So that's changed a lot over the years of how we look after people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And a program that's really being used most often now is the Gentle Persuasive Approach, GPA. So this program's really changed the way that we care for people, and it follows best practice guidelines. So probably a lot of you have taken the Gentle Persuasive Approach this past year, and maybe that could have been one of your learning goals that you used for 2018. You might also think back to when the use of restraints used to be commonplace years ago, and now best practice states that we have a 0 restraint policy in homes. So that's a change that's happened over the years that you would have followed best practice for, so you would have had to make sure you're remaining competent in changes like that. So these examples really speak to the importance of remaining competent, knowing your knowledge and skills and ways that you participate in lifelong learning. And as it says on the screen, LPNs are mandated by legislation to participate in lifelong learning as self-regulating professionals. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the slides. So why is CCP important? Well, there's several reasons that it's important. One is because of the protection of the public. So it's in the best interest of the public in terms of the public's protection and safety. It also improves your own nursing practice and your client outcomes. So it's in your best interest because it's going to help ensure that your nursing practice and your client outcomes are going to improve. Because our #1 priority is always going to be public protection and patient safety. So that's why we want to make sure that we're always practicing safely for our patients and that the decisions that we're making are going to be based on the most recent and strongest healthcare evidence. So that's why we have to stay current and up to date with our skills, and we have a professional obligation to do this. So why is it mandatory? So I get this question a lot. People call and like, why do we have to do this now? It's just something else that we have to do. But really across Canada, all jurisdictions across Canada are participating in the continuing competence program. So it's not a new thing. It's new to us, but it has been going on for quite a while. So LPNs have a professional obligation to attain and maintain competence relevant to their area of practice. So you certainly don't have to be an expert in all areas of practice. That would be impossible. So we know that nursing is very broad. There's a lot of different areas of nursing. It's impossible for one person to know everything there is to know about nursing. But you do need to maintain your competency in your area of practice. And this is outlined in our standards of practice that we as licensed professionals have to adhere to. So when we look at our standards of practice, our first standard is professional accountability and responsibility. And it states that LPNs must engage in ongoing self-assessment of their professional practice and competence and seek opportunities for continuous learning. We also have to adhere to a code of ethics, and that speaks to the importance of continuing competency as well. So Principle 1 talks about responsibility to the public. So we have to maintain our standards of practice, professional competence, and conduct. Principle 5 is responsibility to yourself. So LPNs must engage in opportunities for career-long learning to continuously develop the competencies required to meet the ethical and regulatory requirements of the profession. So as self-regulating professionals, we have to adhere to both our standards of practice and our code of ethics, and both state the requirement of career-long learning and competency. So CCP was part of the registration process this year for 2019. So every year when you register online, you're going to be asked to declare your compliance with the continuing competence program. Declaring your compliance simply states that you understand that it's mandatory and that all actively practicing LPNs have to participate. So when you registered online for your 2019 license, you would have noticed a new section that was titled Continuing Competence Program. And in that section, it stated that participation in CCP is mandatory, and it asked you to declare that you completed the requirements. So you could click yes or you could click no. So clicking yes obviously means that you understand and that you have complied with all the requirements of the program. If you click no, you would have heard from me letting you know that this was mandatory for all LPNs. So we did have an amount of LPNs that did click no on their registration form, and I followed up with each of those LPNs and gave everybody a second chance to declare their compliance. Because it was something new, some people might have clicked no by accident because it's right after all those questions when you ask if you've ever been disciplined or been convicted of anything. So most of us click no, no, no to those 3 questions. So maybe you were just in the habit of clicking no. Maybe you just didn't really understand what it was asking you because you weren't sure what CCP was. So we did give you a second chance to declare your compliance after explaining it to you. Those who still did not declare their compliance had a 90-day condition placed on their license. Employers are made aware, but once that you comply, that 90-day condition is lifted. So you have 90 days to amend it. And today we've got 99% of our LPNs have declared their compliance with CCP. So that's pretty good for the very first year. So how do I complete the process? So there's basically just 4 steps you need to do to go through this whole process. So I'm just going to list the 4 steps, and then we're going to talk about each of them individually. So your first step is just to complete your self-assessment. Then you're going to develop your learning goals or your learning plan. Then you want to implement those goals and your learning plan. And then finally, you're just going to document those goals in the record of learning document and keep them in your personal learning portfolio. So we'll break down these 4 steps. So complete your self-assessment is the very first one. So all of the documents that I speak of, they can be located on our website. So it's just anblpn.ca. and it's under the Continuing Competence Program tab. So there is a whole section on our website dedicated to the Continuing Competence Program. So if you haven't checked that out, I encourage you to do so. There's an instruction book, this self-assessment tool that I'm about to speak of, your record of learning, there's frequently asked questions. So there's lots of supporting documents available to you. So your first step is to complete your self-assessment. So we provide you with the self-assessment learning tools, and you can use that tool to help narrow down your learning goals, because sometimes it just seems too big at first and you think, oh my goodness, I don't know what I want to work on now. So this tool is really going to help you go through that process and help you narrow down those learning goals. So you can rate yourself as novice, intermediate, or proficient in many, many different areas of nursing. And then if you find that you're novice, which means you have very little experience or knowledge in a particular area, this might be where you want to focus your learning goals on. So the tool that you can use, the self-assessment tool, it can be used over a 5-year period. So you can look back and see how you've improved your competency. So maybe the first year you've used this tool, you've rated yourself novice in a particular area, and then 3 years later you look back and you see that you've moved maybe to intermediate, or maybe you've moved yourself to proficient because you focused on those areas for your learning goals. So the tool really is just for your personal use. You don't need to send this to us. You're going to keep that in your personal learning portfolio. So lots of folks that have been audited this year are sending me their 14-page self-assessment document, and I don't need that. It is part of the process, because in order for you to focus on learning goals, you do have to take a moment and reflect and self-assess on what it is you want to learn or work on, but you don't need to send that to me. So please just keep that at home. And then once you've narrowed down an area that you're going to focus on for your competency, you want to make sure that it's reflective of your current practice. So an example of this that many of you might have already heard me talk about is if you're an LPN that works on the maternity ward and you decide to go to an Alzheimer's conference, that's probably not going to be a great learning goal for you, because you're not going to take what you learned from the Alzheimer's conference and implement it into your practice on the maternity floor. So just kind of think about it that way. So once you've done that, you're ready to move on to step 2, which is just to develop your learning plan. So this is where you're going to map out how exactly you're going to accomplish these goals. So you want to go to our website again. We have a record of learning document, and you can print that off. So this is where you're going to record the goals that you plan to accomplish. You need 2 learning goals every year. Now you're going to find, once you sit back and kind of self-reflect on everything it is that you did, you're probably going to realize that you have way more than 2 learning goals, because we're always, maybe attending education sessions, we're reading articles, we're mentoring with our colleagues. So you are continuously doing this. But for the purposes of CCP, you only need to document 2 of them. They have to be accomplished within 1 licensing year. So for the 2019 licensing year, we were looking for you to have completed 2 learning goals in 2018. So it's kind of like your taxes, it's retroactive. And then of course, you're going to make sure that your learning goals are reflective of your current practice, which we already discussed on the previous slide. This is an area where I've had a lot of questions on, and it gets a little sticky for people. So mandatory generic employer education is not specific to nursing. So things like CPR and first aid, WMIS, occupational health and safety, those are employer mandated opportunities for you, but they're not specific to nursing. And it's generally not new knowledge for people. Something like CPR and first aid, you've probably taken many, many times throughout your career. So this isn't new knowledge. So try to think outside the box a little bit on that. We're not looking for CPR and first aid. Your learning goals have to address a specific learning need, and the learning goals have to reflect your nursing knowledge. So I've had a lot of people call verifying their learning goals to make sure that they're appropriate, which is fine. I don't mind answering questions at all. But if you can answer these 3 questions about your learning goal, then it's going to be an appropriate learning goal for you. So whatever your learning goal is, can you pinpoint what the new knowledge is that you learned? So can you pick out something specific from reading that article, going to that in-service that was new knowledge for you? Then can you state how that new knowledge is going to improve your practice? So what is it about this thing that you learned that's going to improve your nursing practice? And can you also state how this new knowledge is going to improve your patient outcomes? So why is this going to be a good thing for the patients that you look after? So an example of this would be phlebotomy. So hundreds of you have taken phlebotomy this past year. We put on a lot of workshops. So this was new knowledge to a lot of people because phlebotomy's only been part of the LPN program since 2012. And if you graduated before 2012, like myself, then this was new knowledge for you. How is it going to improve your practice now that you can perform phlebotomy? Well, you're going to be able to process orders more efficiently because you don't have to wait for another staff member to draw that blood. It's also an entry to practice competency, so you're meeting your entry to practice competencies by gaining this new knowledge of phlebotomy. And how is it going to improve your patient outcomes? Well, it's going to improve your patient outcomes because your patient doesn't have to wait for that blood to be drawn by somebody else because you can just go ahead and process that order. It's going to give the patient continuity of care because it's going to be the same nursing professional doing it. And your patient's going to get the results of their blood test quicker and get their treatment quicker if needed because you were able to just go ahead and process that order. So if you can kind of follow those steps when you're thinking about your learning goals. So you've done that, and now you're all set for step 3, which is just implementing your learning plan. So this is just time to put your plan into action and reflect on your learning. So as you complete those learning goals, you just want to record them on your record of learning, which I'm going to show you that here in the next slide. And the record of learning is where you're going to state the new knowledge obtained, how it's going to improve your practice and your patient outcomes, which is what we just talked about. And you want to make sure to provide reflection and specifics related to your learning. So your personal reflection is really the most important part. We're looking for you to be specific. So you don't want to state something vague like, I attended this wound care in-services and it was great. So that doesn't really tell us anything. We know you went to a wound care service, but you didn't tell us what was the new knowledge. So why was it great? What did you learn? Was there a new product that they showed you that you weren't aware of? And now you're seeing really great results because you've started using this product. You also don't want to say things like, I want to learn this because I want to keep current. So how is it going to make you current? Is this an entry to practice competency that you've had to go back and do this because it wasn't available in your program? What are you trying to keep current in? So just give us some specifics about your learning goal. So there's your record of learning that hopefully you've all already seen before. So you'll note the dates on the top, December 1st to November 30th, because that's our licensing year. So for this audit, we're looking for goals to have been completed between December 1st, 2017 to November 30th, 2018. So you'll see on the top of the learning plan, date completed. You want to make sure you fill that in. So a lot of people are sending in their records of learning without the date at the top. We need to know when you did this because we need to know that it was done during the licensing year. So make sure you put in the date that you did this learning goal. Then you're going to see professional learning goal number 1. So this is just simply where you're going to state what your goal is. I want to learn how to perform phlebotomy. Whatever it is your goal is going to be. And then you'll see, did you receive a certificate of attendance or participation while achieving this goal? So it's just a yes/no question. It's okay if you don't have a certificate because not everything we do gives us a certificate. So you're not going to get a certificate for reading a healthcare article. You might not get a certificate for attending an in-service. That's fine. But if you, again, can just note the date that the in-service was at the top of this sheet and what the topic of the in-service was, then that gives us the information about it. So then the next 3 boxes refers to those 3 statements we talked about, your learning goals. So your client outcomes, This is where you're going to state how this is going to improve your practice and your client outcomes. Then it asks you for your new knowledge, identify the specific new knowledge that you acquired. So by attending this in-service, I learned blank. And then reflect on how you're going to use this new knowledge to improve your practice, which I said is the most important part. So make sure you have a lot of reflection in that section. So here's a couple of examples of some learning goals. So you might choose to attend conferences or enroll in courses and use them towards your CCP, which is fine, but you also don't need to spend any money to meet your learning goals. So it doesn't have to be an expensive venture. So I just popped up a few examples there. Attending an in-service. So there's many in-services if you work in the hospital settings, often nursing homes can offer that as well. They're usually free of charge. So if you go to any in-services throughout the year, you again just note the date that you went, what the topic was, maybe who the speaker was, and what you learned at that in-service. Watch a webinar. So we have many webinars on our website. You could use this as a learning goal. We have one on social media, scope of practice, different things on our website, and there's webinars available on all kinds of different healthcare websites. You want to just note the title of the webinar, what it was about, and be able to pick out something specific from that webinar that you learned. Maybe you read a healthcare article or you do some independent research. So maybe you've gotten a patient or a resident with a diagnosis that you've really never heard of or you're not familiar with. So you decide to research that diagnosis so that you can learn a little bit more about it and be able to care for that patient better. Maybe you do something like mentoring with a colleague on a specific skill. So maybe you feel like you've never really nailed oscillating lung sounds and you're not really sure what you're listening for, but you work with somebody who's really great at that. So you spend some time with them learning some tips and tricks on a task like that. There's also a lot of free e-learning modules available online as well. I did share some of those in our newsletter and on our Facebook page throughout the year. I know one that a lot of people did was with Pallium Canada. They have a free e-learning module, kind of an introduction to palliative care. So you can do any of those things. You might also decide to attend our AGM. We have an education day. It's always great to get lots of LPNs together, chatting, talking about the industry, and we always provide education at our AGM as well. So those are just some ideas, and when we open it up at the end here, maybe you guys have some ideas you can share with people on the line as well. So here you are at step 4 already. So this is your last step in the process. You want to make sure you keep your record of learning, your self-assessment, any certificates you might receive in a personal learning portfolio at home. So just make yourself up a binder where you keep all of these documents in. Don't send this to us unless you're actually audited. So a lot of people this year, as soon as they registered, they started sending me their record of learning and they weren't even audited. So just tuck it away. And then if you are audited, you simply just need to take out your record of learning from your portfolio, send it to us as per the audit notification letter you're going to receive. It's really important that you do your learning goals in real time so that you can tuck them away, because if you are audited, then you're not going to rush, you're not going to panic because it's already done. Because if you don't stop to record your goals, you're going to forget dates, you're going to forget specifics, and that's when you are going to panic because you're going to think, oh my God, what did I do this year? What date was that? What was that in service on? So make sure you do it in real time and then everything's done. So if you're audited, it's no big deal. You just pull it out of that personal portfolio and you're good to go. So that's basically the 4 steps of the process. I'm going to talk a little bit about the audit because maybe there's some folks on here who have been audited this year or just in preparation for when you do get audited eventually. So every year, ANBLPN is going to conduct a CCP audit. Members are just randomly selected to participate. If you are chosen, you're going to be notified by mail. And the audit's not a punitive process, but it is time sensitive. So if you are audited, all the information needed to comply with the audit is going to be in your audit notification packet that we would send you. And it's important to understand that it's not punitive, so we're not looking to take away people's licenses. But we do need to make sure that members are participating in the interest of public protection and safety, you know, as per Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice that we talked about. So if you are audited, don't panic. I know a lot of people have panicked, but don't. You just need to follow the steps in the letter, return the completed record of learning that you saved in your portfolio, and send it to us by the due date that's indicated on the letter. So when you registered, you declared compliance. So that means your record of learning should have already been done. So you're given 30 days to submit your documents to us if you're audited. You can fax them, you can email them, you can pop them in the mail, you can come in person if you want, you know, if you're local. But when you registered, you declared that it was done. So 30 days is plenty of time to submit your documents. So that's why it's really important that you do these in real time. And if something's missing or require more information from you, we're going to contact you. So again, not looking to take your license away. If something's missing or lacking, we're going to contact you so that you can send what's required. So before I submit the documents to the CCP Auditing Committee, I review them and make sure that everything's there that they need. So if something was missing, I'd contact you and make sure you sent it to us before I forward it on to the committee. So maybe you only sent in one learning goal, and of course we need two. Maybe you didn't send in your questionnaire. That's happened a lot this year. People are sending in the record of learning but forgetting to send in the audit questionnaire. Maybe you didn't put any reflection in your record of learning. So I followed up with all those LPNs individually if there's something significant missing to make sure that you've got everything you need before I forward it on to the audit committee. So every February, the CCP Audit Committee is going to meet to conduct the actual audit, and you're going to be notified by mail of the results of the audit. So there's basically three possible outcomes that come out of this audit. The first is just your compliance is verified, no further action required. So you've sent in your 2 learning goals, you sent in the questionnaire, they review it, everything looks good. So you'll just get a little 2-line letter in the mail that says, thank you for submitting your audit paperwork, and we verified that, you know, everything's in order, you're good to go. It'll be more formal than that, of course. The second, of course, is partially verified. So maybe, again, something's lacking, we're gonna contact you. So if it's partially verified, you would have a 90-day condition on your license, but we notify you. And you've got 90 days to amend it. So again, maybe you didn't send us a learning goal. Maybe it was lacking reflection. You weren't specific enough or something. But you've got 90 days to fix it, and I will have a one-on-one with each person who has maybe partially verified just to explain to you. Because the letter you'll get will have rationale as to why it's partially verified, and please submit the following. So once we have all that, conditions list is lifted from your license, you're good to go. And then the last, which we don't want to see, is non-compliance, which means there's no evidence that you participated. And in that case, then yes, we would suspend your license until you comply. So we would only completely suspend your license if you do not comply at all. So maybe you completely ignored the audit, you sent us nothing, you refused to take part in CCP, then you will have your license suspended. But you can have your license reactivated once you comply with the audit. So once you submit the documents that we're asking you for, and there's proof of you participating, then you can reactivate your license. So we're just going to wrap up, and then we'll open it up to Q&As. So just a few key points to review. Basically, CCP is mandatory. All LPNs have a professional obligation to comply to CCP. It's done in the interest of public protection and ensuring that nursing professionals are keeping their skills current and that they're practicing safely. And in reality, guys, you've been doing this throughout your whole career. Now we're just asking you to write it down. So I really don't think there's an LPN alive who hasn't done any continuous learning throughout their career. If you think back to all the education sessions you've gone to, in-services, healthcare articles, I'm sure you've mentored with colleagues on new tasks or working with residents. I'm sure you've researched stuff. You really have been doing this all along. You just now need to make a note of it. So we'll open it up to Q&A, but if you continue to have questions afterwards or you're too shy to speak online, you can certainly give me a call at the office. My number's there, or you can send me an email. So I'm going to just bring everybody back online here. Show the video panel. And if you want to unmute yourselves, and if you have some questions, I want to thank everybody for joining me today. I'm just going to stop the recording so all our conversation's not online. So thanks very much for joining me today. I hope it's helpful, and I hope we'll have some good discussion here.